Hi, welcome everyone. We're here live at PAWS. We want to say thank you for tuning in, and we want to say a big thank you to our special guest and author, David PAWS, who is here to talk to us a little bit about a very relevant topic with Halloween coming or just around the corner. We want to hear from him. He's the author of Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley. So if you're out there, you have questions regarding animals and this very special topic, please write them down, let us know, and he'll be able to answer them. And so I want to introduce to you guys here with us again, Dr. David PAWS, who will be speaking to us and will be reading a short excerpt from his book, Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley. We want to say a big thank you to him. And of course, again, if you have questions, let us know in the comments section and he will be able to answer them for you. So without any further delay, Dr. PAWS, we want to say thank you so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. It's a lot of fun.
Great. And so I want to start off just, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what got you into being interested in this topic?
Well, I'm from the Rio Grande Valley. I've lived here all my life. And I grew up in a family that's, half Anglo-American on one side and half Mexican-American on the other side. And spent most of my time with my Mexican-American cousins. And from an early age, my grandmother Garza used to tell us all kinds of great stories of the spooky things in the Rio Grande Valley. Legends and ghosts, lechuzas, la llorona, all that great stuff. And so from an early age, I kind of cultivated a love for the macabre and the spooky. And just as I got older and began to read a lot, and went off to college and got my degrees, I just kept finding myself coming back to it time and again. And kids loved it. I was a teacher for 14 years of middle school and high school, and just had a lot of success using the stories with students. And so, my own fascination with it, my family background, and the interest of my students just continued to push me deeper and deeper into studying folklore and things like that.
Fantastic. And so, how many books do you have or have you written that people can go out and look for so they can kind of get caught up? I know that Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley is your latest.
Actually, it is almost my latest. I have another book that came out just a couple of weeks after. It's really weird to have books come out that close together, but I have a book called Lords of the Earth, which is a monster novel about monsters emerging from volcanoes in Mexico. But I've got 10 books out there, and there's about 4 or 5 of them that are about this sort of thing, folk tales, ghost stories, and so forth. Mexican Bestiary is a bilingual book that I wrote for younger people about these kinds of creatures. Then I also have Border Lore, which came out from the History Press. I have Creature Feature, and then, of course, Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley, which just came out September 26th.
That's amazing. And yeah, so what, I know it's hard, probably kind of like choosing your favorite, or which one kind of started you off or really helped you get to where you are today? Like, what do you think, what book really stands out in your mind?
Well, the book that really stands out in my mind is the one from last summer, Border Lore. And just because right now we're working with a couple of Hollywood production companies to turn it into a TV series, kind of like a Latino's Tale from the Crypt, if you will, an anthology series of the gruesome stories from the borderlands. So because of its success in that way and acceptance and so forth, I really do like it a lot. But Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley, since it just came out, most authors are going to tell you their most recent book is the one that's nearest and dearest to their heart. People are kind of like going gangbusters about it, going nuts over it. It's you can find it nearly anywhere. It's like in Walgreens and Costco and stuff like that, and Barnes and Noble, and people are picking it up, and I'm getting really good responses for them because these are the haunting stories that we told ourselves or that we told each other growing up in this area. And people really have an affinity for it and a fascination with them. And I embed the stories in the history of each one of the places. And so you can kind of hook a reader by the idea of a ghost story, and then they go on to read about the history of the area as well. And it's something that doesn't get taught in school, and I think that our kids really need it. So it's an important project, and I love it.
So as everyone can tell, we have some furry friends that have joined us for today's visit. All of these cats that you see are available for adoption. And so what can you tell us? What role do animals play in kind of these stories?
Well, I've done a lot of research into animals, and of course, here in South Texas and in Mexico, animals are often part of shape-shifting rituals. So you have creatures called nahuales, which are sometimes witches that can transform into animal shapes, or sometimes people that are just born with the ability that are not looking to use it, but are just able to. It's a lot like the skinwalkers from Native American traditions, right? So you'll have the Mayans used to talk about the Huaypec, the kind of sorcerer who could transform into a dog or a wolf or a coyote. And you see that a lot with Aztec traditions as well. And then when the Spanish came over, they brought with them that medieval European tradition of witches having some kind of animal familiar with them. An owl or a cat of some sort. And that's where a lot of our prejudice against black cats comes from Europe, continental Europe. Because other places in the world, showed a lot of veneration for black cats. In ancient Egypt, for example, owning a black cat was a sign of respect and worship for Bastet, the goddess, right? And every home wanted to have a black cat. It was the thing to do. It brought blessings and good luck to your family. Sailors, for the longest time, wanted to have a black cat aboard their ship because it meant that the ship would not sink, that it would be successful, because it brought good luck and not the bad luck that we've come to believe nowadays. Fishermen, for the longest time, also, having a black cat meant that you were going to have a good catch. And you wanted one, hanging about as you were fishing off the shore and there in your home and so forth. And you think about it, cats are great, they love fish. They're great at fishing, even if it's fishing a goldfish out of a tank. They're good at that. And in Japan, black cats are considered a harbinger of really, really good luck. So, this kind of bias that some people have that makes them not want to adopt black cats, it's unfortunate. In England, and a lot of the people who came and colonized the United States came from England, it was considered good luck to have black cats. It was only in continental Europe where they would do these crazy things like have huge bonfires and throw black cats on them to get rid of them, which is kind of unfortunate because black cats are just the same as any other cat. It's just a genetic, tweak that gives them the color of their fur. And so, we have a long history here in this region with ocelots and jaguars and jaguarundis and things like that of being really close to the feline creatures. They're important to our ecology and to our culture, and I think that the house cats are an important part of that as well when they're taken care of, spaded and neutered and treated with dignity like they should be. I know the dogs next door agree with me.
Yeah. So all of those noises are just part of being here at the PAWS Center. But you bring a really great point as far as adoptions and cats. And, as black cats, we get a lot of questions about black cats, especially during this time. And people are either they want to adopt them because they love black cats or because they fear that somebody else is going to adopt them and not do right by them. Or we have people that still to this day will walk in and say, oh no, not a black cat. We like
of their superstitions.
Yeah, and not and sometimes we don't even get to that conversation. But what, can you think of maybe some specific stories or specific things or something that kind of ties it in? Maybe things that we've heard or stories that we've all grown up with that somehow, some way, still play a part in our decision making.
You think about it. we all this lore about black cats. If a black cat crosses your path, it's bad luck. If it crosses under a ladder, there could be an accident. Just the notion that black cats are being sent out by witches to spy on people and keep an eye on them. And a lot of this comes from the ancient traditions in Europe that if a black cat were to walk toward you, then it was a sign of good luck. But if it were to walk away from you, then it was intimating bad luck was on the way. And see, he's walking away from me, and everything is falling off the table. So maybe there's some credence to be given to this. So, I mean, yeah, it's, and we see it so much also in our national culture, centering on Halloween. There's always, if you have a movie or a cartoon or a costume of a witch, she's almost always accompanied by a black cat. And so people who look at witches in kind of like this innocent way of like, oh yeah, these are just stories we tell, and witches are not really around doing magic or whatever, you're going to see cats as harmless. But people who take witchcraft really seriously and believe that there are witches in our community trying to do harm to other people, that they're going to take it a little more seriously, and they're going to be concerned about it. And one of the things that I would say is, regardless of what you believe, whether you believe that there's such a thing as black magic and witches working it, or you don't, I think that it still boils down to the same thing. It's the way people use the animals, the treatment they give them. Any animal given love and respect and proper care is going to be a loving, beautiful animal. And it's only when we allow our prejudices and our human cruelty and so forth to influence the way we treat animals that they might turn on us. And that's the same for any breed of animal. So, I say don't be afraid of black cats, but also don't get all obsessed with black cats and like, oh, let's adopt a bunch of black cats around Halloween and like stand them all around our house, because they need your care. They're not like window dressing or toys for.
They're not props.
They're not props for your Halloween party, right? Yeah. If you want a black cat, adopt it, take care of it, and then by the time it's Halloween, it'll be your friend and it will accompany you. But if you're trying to adopt a black cat like a couple of weeks out from Halloween because you think it's cute to have one, that's a bad idea.
So another thing that we see is even with the black dogs, is there any does that come from somewhere?
So black dogs, it's great that you bring that up. So there's a tradition, mainly from Central America, but also Southern Mexico, of what's called a cadejo. A cadejo is a black spirit dog or black demon dog. And the idea is that children sometimes, and even adults, will be pursued when they're on their own in like deserted areas by a very large, fierce-looking dog, often described with having reddish eyes, or eyes that reflect the light in a red way. And this spirit dog is supposedly conjured up by, a curandera or a bruja or something that wants to do bad to people. And the dog will, follow the child or chase the child. And there's supposedly basically two ways that you can dispel the cadejo. And one of them is wielding an iron machete. A good-hearted man can wield an iron machete, slash sorry, cat. He stood on the book and it was hanging on the edge. He's upset with me now. And can wield the machete to slice through the spirit dog and make it go away. Or, and this is the trickiest thing of all, you can stand firm, face the spirit dog, spit into the palm of your hand, hold it out, and let the thing lick the spittle off your palm. And if you're brave enough to do that, then the minute it licks the spittle off your palm, it will disappear. It's a story that my dad told me when I was a kid, and I haven't had a chance to try it out. I think I'd be too chicken. I'd probably just keep running and look for a machete. There's some black dogs. So, but I mean, these are like spirit dogs, and they're accompanied by supposedly accompanied by the stench of rotting meat, and you would know if you came across one. They're not just regular black dogs just hanging out. And so again, people sometimes have a prejudice against them because they grow up. No, es un cadejo. No, ojo con eso porque te puede matar. The kind of stuff that people tend to say. And we just have to be. Just try to educate people, and there's fun stories to tell, but when you're an adult, you kind of have to let that kind of stuff go, and it's fun to tell the stories and kind of get kids freaked out about it or whatever. But at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to the animals in our community. They are they are species that coexist with us, and we need to make sure that they're okay, right?
And so, in your books, do you go into detail where these kind of ideas come from, the history behind them? tying them into maybe historical events
sure,
or situations?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I retold the black dog story in my very first book called The Seed. It's a collection of short stories, and in that one I have the story of a spirit dog during the civil rights movement in the Rio Grande Valley, when Mexican American children used to have to attend separate schools. They weren't in the same schools as Anglo American children, and there were lawyers that were fighting to integrate the schools. And so I set the story in this community where Mexican American students are being integrated into the same schools as white kids, and there's a cadejo that's trying to prevent them from going. And so, trying to, this is something I do a lot with my stories, is try to make a connection to history so that people can see the reverberations of folklore and history. And like I say, you hook them with the scary stuff, and then you try to teach them something about our own, gente, historia, and cultura.
I think, I think it's interesting if people realize that you have these maybe prejudice against this type of dog or that kind of cat, to maybe take a step back and learn where all these things stem. Maybe that could change a little bit of, maybe these ideas that we have, and it would help us with our struggles of adopting out these animals.
The book where I do a little bit more of that, I guess, would be this bilingual encyclopedia that I created with painter Noevela. It's called Mexican Bestiary. A bestiary is like an encyclopedia of legendary creatures, right? And so this one, and it's subtitled in Spanish, Bestiario Mexicano, and it's got about 40 different creatures, including the ghost dog, the Cadejo, with like origin stories, like where does this emerge from, what mythology or whatever, right? Échame un Cadejo, yo me lo araño.
Yeah, she seems fearless. No, but I think it's...
You're right, yeah, you're totally right. We need to educate ourselves on where these things come from and understand the... Aww. Let's hope that they don't get into a fight, because that would be awkward. You're the black cat. You're supposed to be on your best behavior.
Have to represent.
You have to represent.
So, so I think that that's a good thing to put out there. Oftentimes we get a lot of questions, especially from kids, is, well, why are and they phrase it this way: why are black cats bad?
Oh,
and that's what they think, and so that's coming from somewhere. And so I think it's always a good idea to be able to show them kind of where all of this stems from, and these stories, and have them really think about it. And I think that your books would be a great source for that information. So any other stories dealing with cats or animals in general? We see all sorts of animals here through our center.
Yeah, no, I mean, I in my books I talk a lot about different types of birds. Obviously, screech owls and barn owls are of great interest to people. I talk about some of the stories about rats. Like, there's supposedly a giant rat in Mexico City in the Merced market and things like that. So I do talk about animals to some extent, although I guess a lot of the stories to tell are more about like legendary or monstrous kinds of creatures than about actual animals. But there are all kinds of really cool things, from feathered coyotes in Mexican mythology to like the big bird that attacked supposedly people in 1976 in the Rio Grande Valley the first 2 months. A prehistoric looking creature that some science teachers who were driving to San Antonio and they saw it, they were like, oh my, that's a pteranodon. Those have been extinct for 100 million years. You're like, wow. Get scared like the rest of us. Don't analyze things. Gosh. But so yeah, people who are interested in animals can find a lot to enjoy in some of my books. We have cats at home. I enjoy cats and I enjoy dogs, and they're great companions and worthy additions to people's households. And we need to take them, as I say, as individuals and not based on centuries old mythology and legends that here in as we say, pleno siglo XXI, right in the middle of the 21st century, we should be able to move beyond some of that. I don't want to say it too ugly, but it's kind of ignorance in a way, you know. And it's a mixture of ignorance and superstition, and then just like a desire to tell scary stories. And so little kids come in because we scare them, like, oh yeah, black cat, be careful, and da da da. And we're just kind of goofing off them, but they take it very seriously. When I was 4 or 5 years old, every story that I was told was the God's honest truth. I believed it 100%. And later on in life, when I started realizing that some of it wasn't true, I was a little disappointed at times. It's like, wow, you know, I really wanted that to be true, or can't believe you scared me with that. So, I think we owe it to kids, especially when it has to do with animals, you know, to be kind of, to come clean with them about the truth.
What would you recommend, I mean, as maybe to parents? Because we want to, I think that some of these stories are tied into our culture, and it's a great way to pass along, you know, maybe an experience you had as a child to your own child. Is there a better way of doing it? What would you recommend, you know, to kind of keep some honesty as far as, and not to, how can I say it?
Not rob them of their culture, but at the same time not...
Yeah, not to continue these, maybe some of these harsher ideas that kind of put some animals into a back position.
Well, what I've done with my own children, and of course, 2 of my daughters are already adults, and the last one is in high school. But when they were younger, what I would do is, you know, I would try to be honest with them. I would tell them a story, I would scare them, and then we would decompress, and I would talk to them. Now that I've scared the pants off of you, let's talk about the truth of this stuff. This, you know, there's not really a llorona. It's just a story that we've used to try to, you know, warn you away from bodies of water. And it's a way of, it's like shorthand for reminding you quickly, bodies of water are dangerous. You know, there are undercurrents and all kinds of crazy things that you don't know about. Stay away from it. And if just remembering llorona helps you to, like, quickly, you know, associate all of those dangerous ideas with that body of water, then that's fine. So, I mean, good parenting is just about that. It's about sharing. It's the truth about things and decompressing. It's, you know, you can sit down with a kid and watch a very scary movie on TV, or something that maybe is a little questionable in terms of content, as long as afterwards you have a talk about it. Let's talk about what we just saw. This, you know, so-and-so treated this other person in a really horrible way, and we don't do that. We don't believe that that's right in our family. And why do you think that guy did that? And you have, you know, conversations about the entertainment that you're, and so that they don't just, like, internalize bad behaviors. And the same thing holds true with scary stories. You tell them scary stories, you get them all scared, and then, maybe not right then because you don't want to ruin the mood, but the next day, you talk about it. You know, last night we were telling the scary stories about La Mano Pachona. You know, he's not actually going to crawl around and grab you. It's just a way of talking about our fear of shadows and dark places and things that crawl, and we, you know, you associate with La Mano Pachona, and you keep yourself safe from creepy crawly things that maybe are poisonous or whatever. So I think there's no easy way to do it other than just being honest. And a lot of people think that you have to create an illusion for kids so that they can have this, like, mystical childhood. But I think that you can have it both ways. I think you can give them a bit of the mysticism, and then you can also be honest with them. You know, let them have their moment of fun and of you know, let them, you know, believe in Santa Claus for a little while or whatever, but at some point you have to tell them the truth, right? At some point, you know, they need to be disabused of these notions that black cats and black dogs are somehow evil, and just learn that because the color black is associated with night and things like that, we tend to, you know, imbue the color black with negative connotations. But that black doesn't have to be negative. For the Chinese, black was a color that had a lot of value to it. It was an august color, a color that was respected. The Aztecs felt the same way. Black was a powerful color, a color of the obsidian mirrors in which they could see themselves and communicate with the gods and so forth. So there's an auspiciousness to the color black, a sacredness to the color black in lots of cultures that we kind of, you know, water down and twist when we turn it into something evil. So just exploring lots of other cultures, I would say, as well, could help with that sort of thing.
So I know you've touched upon a lot of different stories. growing up as a kid, thinking back, do you have one favorite story maybe that you heard, or a tale that kind of stands out to you the most?
Well, gosh, it's really hard to say. When I talk to kids about stories, I always tell them that the story, the thing that I was most afraid of was La Mano Pachona, and part of it was that some of my relatives told me that I needed to be careful because it could hide in the toilet. And so the mano pachona, for those of you who don't know, mano pachona or mano peluda or mano negra, these are all terms to describe a disembodied hand, like this, covered in fur. And lots of different legends exist about where it came from. The one that I heard the most was that a Mayan wizard during the Spanish conquest, because the Yucatan Peninsula was the very last part of Mexico to fall, was being tortured by the Inquisition. They were telling him, turn your back on your gods, give up black magic, accept Christ, become a Catholic. And he's like, no, never, I refuse to do it. And they said, well, we're going to chop off your limbs and bury you in an unmarked grave, and no one will be able to find you, none of your people, none of your priests, and certainly not your gods. And he said, do whatever you need to do. And as they prepared themselves, he cast a spell in his right hand. He said, be my vengeance. And when they chopped him up and they buried him, a few days passed and the full moon rose. And as it shone its light down upon the loose soil on his grave, that his hand crawled out into the light of the moon and began a mission of revenge. And so the basic idea is that anybody who has Spanish blood, any Mexican or Mexican-American with Spanish blood, is a potential target of La Mano Pachona. And so the idea is that it hides in places and it goes after bad kids. And so since I was a particularly bad kid, when I was little, mischievous and disobedient and so forth, I was threatened with La Mano Pachona from time to time. And I was told that the thing could even be in the toilet. And so I was so worried about this, the idea that it would reach up and grab me when I was sitting and drag me into the sewer and I would never be seen or heard from again, that I spent a good 8 years from the age of 4 to the age of 12 peering into a toilet bowl before I sat down, until I was a 7th grader at Lincoln Junior High in McAllen, and a bunch of us went into the bathrooms between classes, and there I am standing in the stall looking, and my friends are like, David, what the heck are you doing? And I said, well, sometimes people don't flush. I'm just double checking. But even at the age of 12, it was just something about this idea that something was waiting there in the toilet for you, that it's still hard to get over even to this day, whether it might be a snake or an alligator. You hear all kinds of urban legends about this sort of thing. And it's that is one of the stories that stayed with me the most. And but there were tons of stories of La Llorona drowning her children and then drowning herself, and now wandering the canal, because it was the canal on Ridge Road in South McAllen that was the place that we weren't supposed to go swim in, and that was the one that was supposedly haunted by La Llorona, walking back and forth at night, calling for her children, mis hijos, ¿dónde están mis hijos? And I never went to a canal. My friends would be like, just go swim in the canal. I'm like, I'm not going to any canal, I'm swimming. And they're like, what are you afraid of La Llorona? And, well, whatever, I don't want to go to the canal. It's dirty and filthy, I'm not going to swim there. So yeah, I was told tons of stories, and they stay with you a very long time, and I've written about a lot of them in my work.
So we had a question regarding cats, and
Mm-hmm.
if there's, it says we all know about black cats, but is there any other cats that are talked about in any stories, any specific breeds that you know of?
Well, gosh, I'm kind of drawing a blank. There are legends of different types of cats in Japan, but I'm not really familiar with the names of the breeds. And there's certain ones in Japan that are supposed to be trickster beings. They're not really cats, they're disguised as cats. The Scottish had a legend about a sort of supernatural being that assumed the form of a cat. And they called it the, let me see if I can remember the name, it was the Black She. And she is spelled for some reason S-I-T-H, like Sith from the Star Wars movies, so it's kind of weird. And those beings were, kind of eerie. But yeah, no, I'm kind of drawing a blank about stories on of different types of cats for breeds. They're bound to be stories, but for some reason I don't know. It's a good question, though. Something to definitely to research.
Yeah. I know for the book Ghost of the Rio Grande Valley, is there a particular story or maybe something that you'd like to share? I know we talked about maybe you reading an expert, so maybe this is a good time to do that.
Yeah, sure, why not? Again, I mean, since these stories are about ghosts, I didn't really, there's not really any animals, although there are plenty of like ghost animals in our culture, as we've talked about. But I'll read a really short thing here from it's called The Revenants of Llano Grande, and it's about some ghosts that are supposedly still haunting the Estero Llano Grande Park there south of in Southwest Mexico. So I'm going to give a little bit of the history. I'm not going to read the whole history thing and then read you the legend. So hopefully it'll go by really quickly. We'll see. Long before Spain claimed the territory along the Rio Grande, these lands were home to various indigenous groups known collectively as Cuauhtecans. One particular tribe thrived in the heart of the dense subtropical forest of ebony, Brazil, and wild olive that bordered the broad lakes of what is now southern Hidalgo County. There they were born, loved, and died, their lives brightened by the call of the green jay and the chachalaca, sobered by the ragged growls of jaguarumbis, ocelots, and pumas. The Comecrudo tribe called these brush dwellers Tompacaway, the tattooed people. When Spanish settlers arrived in the early 18th century, their European tongues transformed the name, and the native inhabitants of the valley became Tampacuas. Little more is known about them. Catholicism wended its way through the area, converting many, alienating others. The forest that had been so sacred to them, and the river that had fed their lakes and gave them sustenance, was gradually usurped by ranchers armed with grants from the Spanish king that artificially carved up the lands on which they had freely ranged for centuries. Chief among these was Llano Grande, a land grant. The decades passed. New Spain became Mexico, Nuevo Santander became Coahuila y Texas, then the Republic of Texas, and finally, the state of Texas. Pushed to desperation by hunger, humiliation, and homelessness, the Tampacuas raided Anglo-American ranches in Hidalgo County from 1853 to 1855 until the U.S. Army entered the fray and relocated the dwindling population across the river near Reynosa. Fewer than 100 had survived the ravages of colonialism and manifest destiny. The Tampacuas were not the only indigenous group driven to such extremes in Texas. The once mighty Karankawa, whose extermination had been pursued ruthlessly by Stephen F. Austin, found themselves hiding among the now abandoned Tampacuas Lake. Then a group of men from Mexican ranches crossed the river and finished the job that Anglo-Americans had begun, snuffing out one of the oldest cultures in South Texas. A year later, businessman Juan Nepomuceno Cheno Cortina, a champion of the rights of Mexican Americans in the Rio Grande Valley who despised the actions of the Anglo ruling class, took over Brownsville with a contingent of rebels after abuses by local law enforcement. After several conflicts, Cortina found himself retreating up the river, pursued by Texas Rangers under the command of Colonel John Salmon Rip Ford. In December 1859, many Mexican nationals crossed the border to aid their Tejano brethren, and with them, surprisingly, came the last of the Tampacua people, ready to avenge themselves on the Anglo armed forces and reclaim their ancestral lands and burial grounds along Llano Grande and Tampacua's Lake. They made a final stand there, struggling against all odds. Every last Tampacuas was slain. But before they died, they felled dozens of rangers amid the nettles and brambles. The effect of such slaughter was to compound the desecration of nearby burial grounds and overturn the spiritual balance in the thorn forest. Now, as darkness thickens in the undergrowth each evening, the restless dead return to haunt the thickets. Since 2005, Estero Llano Grande State Park has held a spooky science fest around Halloween each year. Johnny Reina, an elementary student in Weslaco ISD, begged his parents constantly after hearing about the event from his teacher. He loved science and nature and desperately wanted to go. If it meant giving up trick-or-treating, he did not care. His parents could hardly say no to such enthusiasm. The family showed up at 6 p.m. on the appointed day and dove into many activities, crafts, science experiments, costume contests. Night began to fall, and children were regaled with spooky stories, while adults and teenagers opted for night hikes through the wetland habitat. Even though his parents would have preferred to stay in the lighted areas, Johnny was unrelenting in his desire to go on one of the hikes. The family followed their guide as part of a larger group, oohing and awing at the sights. As Mr. and Mrs. Raynup paid careful attention to the historical yarn being spun, their young son saw a narrow path branching off from the main trail. On a whim, he ducked beneath an overhanging branch and began to explore. It was hard to see, even with a nearly full moon above, but Johnny noticed that a short distance ahead, the path became a sort of dark tunnel that bored its way into the brush. He stopped, entirely too frightened to even draw close, and started to turn back before his parents got worried. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of something. Twisting his head, he saw a face peering from behind a tree. "Hello?" Johnny called. Who are you? Did you get lost?" A pale hand emerged, seizing the trunk of the tree. A strange figure pulled itself into the light of the moon. It was a soldier of some sort, wearing an old-fashioned uniform. Johnny hesitated, thinking that this might be a Halloween costume. But then, from the tunnel beyond, other forms began to emerge, shirtless and glowing, long hair black as night, knives in their hands. "Indians," Johnny whispered, before a gasp rose in his throat, for he realized that he could see right through them. The soldier, too. They were ghosts, all of them. The soldier raised his rifle. The Indians rushed him, silent as the stars. Johnny did not wait to see what happened next. Loosing a terrified shriek, he dashed back along the path, screaming for his parents. So, apparently, the ghosts of Texas Rangers and Tampaqua warriors still fight it out every Halloween there in Rio Grande. And I really recommend going there. It's a great place, a beautiful place, but go during the day because at night, just saying, it can be scary.
I think that there's so much history that that we don't read about enough, we don't see enough, and I think that presenting it as, in your book, Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley, I think you did such a great job in talking about the ghost story, but the history behind it. You got a whole history lesson leading up to this wonderful, wonderful experience and this ghost story.
Well, thank you. And that's really what I hope to accomplish. And when the History Press asked me to do the book, that's what I basically told them. I said, I want to create a book that will explore all these haunted places, but with an eye to the history and blend the two together so we don't forget. I mean, because when you go to school, you went to school in the Valley, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. And we didn't learn about these things. Sometimes they're stories that were preserved by our relatives and kept alive, or other times you have to explore it on your own, or you got to college and suddenly started hearing this stuff and you're like, I've been robbed all my life of this rich history, and all I ever get taught is this whitewashed version of Texas history. Nothing about the Valley, nothing about the struggle, nothing about the lynchings of Mexican Americans, thousands of Mexican Americans by Texas Rangers. None of that stuff. And I just really feel like I owe a debt to my community. The things that I've learned, I need to pass on to people, and give adults a tool that they can use to kind of get the younger people interested in it and learning about history as they're also getting freaked out by ghost stories.
Now, I think it's a great approach, like I said, and I agree with you. It wasn't until I went to college and had somebody else talk to me about the things that happened down here with the protests and the student protests.
Yeah.
They were talking about it, and then they said in the Rio Grande Valley, and I'm like, wait, I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, and what an amazing gift to be able to give our youth and our young people, and even if you're not from the Valley and you've made your home here, to learn of what a rich history we have, and what a great way to present it. Such a fun way, very interesting, very captivating. So we want to say a huge thank you to you.
Thanks. It's been so much fun. The cats have been great. I've really enjoyed it. the work that is done here at the PAWS Center is so invaluable, and I really, really urge people, if they haven't come out here, to come out, take a tour, see the animals, adopt one of these like beautiful, beautiful creatures to have as a companion. And I just had a lot of fun hanging out with them, and it's really, really great. Thank you so much. And your questions have been great, and it's been lovely. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. And again, we want to invite everyone to join us in the future for other live at LPA PAWS for another segment. We want to invite everyone to join us this Monday. We will be having a trick-or-treat event here at our center from 11 to 6. All you have to do is be dressed up. And at 4 p.m. on Monday, we'll be doing a costume contest if you want to join us. And a big thank you. Go out. Go get this book. It's super interesting. It's what a great way if you're having a get-together, if you're wanting to, maybe share some of these stories with your kids and teach them that all of these fascinating things happened right here where they're from. So again, we want to say thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everyone that is always a big part of what we're doing. And again, go out, take a look at this book, and make it a part of your Halloween reading, Ghosts of the Rio Grande Valley. Again, all of these things happened right here, right in our backyard. Let's learn a little bit more about it. And again, learn more about where all these myths and legends and maybe some of our prejudice against some of our cats and dogs come from. The more that we understand, the better we can do for not only the animals under our care, but for one another. So a big shout out. Thank you so much, and join us next time.